There was a huge creature that, believed to be under ancient oceans, was so huge that it reinvented the concept of apex predation. The Megalodon, a shark of unimaginable sizes, spent 2 decades on the ocean, with teeth that were the size of the human ones and jaws that could swallow cars completely. It was not fiction, but was a reality and was fashioned into stone using fossilized remains that were found on every continent. There was a time, millions of years ago, when we will travel with the family to see the emergence, supremacy, and enigmatic extinction of the most terrifying marine predator who has ever lived. This is the ideal killing machine which nature has created. The legend begins now. The name and origins. Megalodon is a heavy word in its words. It is an ancient Greek word that is a combination of mega, which means big or huge, and odon, which means tooth. Giant tooth. The reason behind this simple but impressive name being one cannot be disputed. It was the vast fossilized teeth which initially made the existence of this creature known to modern science. These teeth, of which some were up to 8 inches in length, were discovered a long time before anybody knew what animal they belonged to. They were found by ancient people and were thought to be tongues of a dragon that had been transformed into a stone, or the fangs of a serpent belonging to some mythical creature. Little were they aware that these relics were a part of something much more actual and much more terrible. This ancient shark has been given the modern name Otodus megalodon and has been placed in the now extinct family of Otodontids. This categorization links it to a group of giant prehistoric sharks, which developed unique hunter adaptations in tens of millions of years. Most people consider the Megalodon to be just a version of a large great white shark, but genetic and fossil evidence indicates that it in fact was a distant relative that had similar beginnings with modern makos and great whites, but evolved independently. This differentiation is important as it determined all the aspects of life of this predator, ways he hunted, and eventually vanished. The chronology of the life of Megalodon is barely imaginable. It originated some 23 million years ago in the early Miocene age, many years after the dinosaurs had become extinct by the devastating asteroid collision that lopped off the end of the Cretaceous age. Contextually, it would take another 22 million years before humans would first walk the Earth, since the time Megalodon first appeared. This shark has seen the world change with the passage of time many thousand times. Continents were shifting, climates changed, and some entire ecosystems were born and died. It lived until about 3.6 million years ago, and it went extinct in the early Pliocene period. And the reason why it went into extinction is something that we are only just beginning to comprehend properly. As opposed to the sensationalized documentaries and Hollywood blockbusters that portray Megalodon lurking in the deepest trench of the ocean today, this shark roamed in warm seawaters and coastal waters in the ancient world. The seas it was familiar with were hardly similar to what the marine environments are like at present, with higher temperatures and various current patterns with creatures which are now extinct. The issue of where and when Megalodon lived is also very important to understand how it managed to become extinct in the end and its biological history. The anatomy of sharks is one of the most important problems of paleontologists who examine Megalodon. Sharks have an all-cartilage skeleton, like the ears and noses of human beings, as opposed to mammals or dinosaurs, which have bones that are composed of calcium and are therefore fossilized comparatively easily. Cartilage also decays quickly, and when dead, seldom remains in the form of fossils, unless there are exceptional circumstances. This implies that even though Megalodon was reigning in millions of years in the oceans, there are just a few complete skeletal remains of the fish, and what we have in great abundance are teeth. Throughout their lifespan, sharks shed and produce thousands of teeth, which they replace every time. These teeth, plus their enamel structure, also ensure that they are incredibly resistant to decay and that they are ideal to fossilize. Additionally, researchers have found fossilized vertebrae, the only cartilaginous shark structures rigid enough to occasionally preserve, and compelling evidence in the form of whale bones bearing massive bite marks that perfectly match Megalodon tooth patterns. The ultimate predator. In the case of Megalodon, it is almost irrelevant to speak about size, since the very number is beyond the human imagination. This was the biggest shark that ever existed, and it may be the biggest predator fish in the entire history of our Earth. The conservative scientific opinion is that Megalodon, on average, were between 10 and 18 meters, or about 33 to 60 feet long. In order to put this into perspective, take 3 full-sized cars, and then imagine that the entire length of them is owned by one living creature and is spent in water at a tremendous speed and power. There is some fossil evidence, especially of extraordinarily large teeth and vertebrae, that some individuals might have been more than even these measurements, up to 24 meters or about 80 feet. But this is highly contested among scholars. The size of the body itself of Megalodon provided the benefits of hunting which modern sharks are unable to obtain. Its skull was several meters long and contained a jaw able to stretch to a width of close to 3 meters. That was a large opening that could take in 2 adult human beings standing at the same time and not necessarily in contact with their teeth. But it was not the gape that made this jaw legendary. It was what filled it. Megalodon had the most dreadful dentition in marine history. It had about 276 teeth, and these teeth were arranged in several rows, and each tooth was a masterpiece of nature. These teeth were as long as 18 centimeters, about 7 inches, and the serrated edges were razor sharp and ran up and down the sides like microscopic steak knives. The triangular form gave strength to the structure, and the serrations made the teeth saw through flesh, blubber, and bone in a horrifying manner. The teeth of sharks are constantly renewed during the life of the animal, unlike the mammalian teeth that only grow once and are left forever. One megalodon was probably capable of growing and losing tens of thousands of teeth in its lifetime, which explains why fossilized megalodon teeth are found with relative frequency across ancient seabeds worldwide, while complete skeletons remain virtually non-existent. Hunting strategy and prey. Megalodon was not just surviving on the top of the food chain. It was so much in the ascendant that it was hardly possible to have anything in the ocean that was dangerous to a full-grown man. Its diet was also based mainly on the large sea mammals, especially the primitive whales, dolphins, seals, and sea lions. It also preyed on huge, bony creatures and presumably other types of sharks, including its own smaller members. Fossil record. The fossil record gives strong evidence of this type of diet by the presence of preserved whale bones with distinctive bite marks that exactly match megalodon tooth spacing and serration patterns. These bones speak of hunting in the ancient past, and the attack angle, the depth of the bite, and the feeding behavior are stored in ice. A study of these fossilized bite marks indicates the hunting behavior of megalodon. Instead of charging at prey and biting, releasing prey to give time to weaken, as modern great whites do, megalodon seems to have attacked prey underwater or behind them, striking the vital parts of the body such as fins and flukes to stun prey instantly. The huge jaws of the shark would penetrate blubber, muscle, down to bone in one bite, and the great jaw muscles produced cataclysmic power. The bite force of Megalodon has been estimated by scientists to have been between 108,000 and 182,000 newtons. This was one of the strongest bites recorded in an animal, either living or extinct. To provide an example, a contemporary great white shark produces about 18,000 newtons, and a Tyrannosaurus rex is approximated to produce about 50,000 newtons. The bite of Megalodon was not just strong, it was apocalyptic. Global dominance. The reign of Megalodon covered almost all the waters on the planet. The teeth of the species have been found on all continents except Antarctica, but this is probably due to lack of fossil hunting in the Antarctic areas and not necessarily the lack of the species. Such a worldwide distribution shows some significant facts about the biology and behavior of Megalodon. To begin with, it is very adaptive to changing oceanic conditions. Second, it suggests a powerful swimming ability allowing individuals to cross vast distances, potentially migrating seasonally to follow prey populations or seek optimal breeding grounds. The shark was very selective to warm and temperate waters, and this could have been as a result of following currents containing nutrient upwellings, which supported high numbers of their prey. Fossils indicate that Megalodon developed certain nursery habitats where females delivered and the young ones spent their early stage in a relatively safe, shallow environment, Then they moved to open water when they were mature. These nurseries not only supplied young sharks with plenty of small prey, but also they gave them protection against bigger predators, such as adult megalodons, which sometimes were cannibalistic. The fall of a titan. Although Megalodon was able to dominate the oceans over the past 2 decades, it however became extinct a few years ago, about 3.6 million years ago. There was no single disastrous incident that swept this apex predator. Rather, extinction was caused by a number of environmental forces combining over a period of hundreds of thousands of years, which slowly eroded the ecological base upon which Megalodon was supported. Global climate change was the major factor. At the late Pliocene, the Earth plunged into a massive cooling phase, which entirely changed the ocean situation across the globe. The oceans receded and narrowed the warm, shallow water of the coastline where Megalodon flourished. The regions were not only good hunting grounds, but they were also the nursery areas where the juveniles could be found. When they vanished, populations of megalodons were sent into more and more restricted areas with diminishing resources. At the same time, the oceans in the process of cooling caused unprecedented changes in the number of marine animals. Most of the large whale species that formed the main food source of Megalodon became extinct or became adapted to colder water and moved to the polar areas of the ocean where Megalodon found it difficult to keep up. The baleen whales in specific experienced evolutionary transformations in that they evolved to be quicker swimmers and learned more difficult behavior to prey. Fewer food items led to starvation pressure, where the Megalodon population was unable to reproduce successfully and survive through juvenile age. To complicate the situation, new species of sharks evolved and expanded at the same time, such as the great white sharks of today. These smaller, more agile predators required less food, adapted more easily to changing conditions, and competed directly with juvenile Megalodon for available prey. While an adult Megalodon could overpower any competitor, young sharks were vulnerable, and increased competition likely reduced juvenile survival rates to unsustainable levels. Together, these factors created a perfect storm of ecological pressure. Megalodon could not adapt quickly enough to survive. Its massive size, once its greatest advantage, became a liability requiring enormous caloric intake that warming-impaired oceans could no longer provide. Within a relatively short geological time span, this ultimate predator vanished completely from Earth's oceans, leaving behind only fossilized teeth as monuments to its former glory. Myth versus reality? In popular culture, Megalodon does not just want to be dead. There are endless documentaries, movies, books, and theories on the internet that argue that this giant shark survived into the present and is currently roaming around the deep ocean unexplored caves or the remote polar waters. It is these assertions that evoke imaginations, because Megalodon represents our worst fears of what might lurk under the sea. Nevertheless, there is absolutely no scientific evidence that can prove its existence. All the valid Megalodon fossils belong to millions of years ago. Purported new teeth or new sightings have been well disproved in most cases by the misidentification of modern sharks, hoaxes, or an incorrect interpretation of the processes of fossilization. There has been a postulation that the deep ocean is much untapped, and as a result, there might be remnants of megalodons, but this hypothesis disregards basic biology. Megalodon was a warm-water coastal predator which consumed big sea mammals. The deep sea does not provide conditions of either appropriate temperatures or food resources. Also, in case Megalodon survived, we would have recent remnants, observe it attacking contemporary whales with typical patterns of bites, and see the ecological effects of such a huge apex predator. All these indicators are absent. However, the cultural heritage of Megalodon survives exactly because it is the best way of showing nature in all its magnificence and horrifying power. It reminds us of the fact that the history of the Earth is filled with chapters written by animals so mighty that they seem to belong to fiction, but every tooth we discover makes us know that they were real indeed. 20 million years ago, Megalodon ruled the oceans, and it was the supreme predator with its bone-crushing jaws and dagger teeth that were less important than modern sharks. It disappeared millions of years ago, but its legacy lives in all the fossilized teeth that have been discovered and all the scientific discoveries made. This giant fish makes us realize that our planet was a part of titans that are impossible to even suppose, and we are the most powerful, and still we can fall as the worlds change. The deep abound with secrets that are there to be discovered. Want to explore more prehistoric monsters and ancient mysteries? Subscribe now, hit that notification bell, and join us on incredible journeys through Earth's lost worlds.